Today you'll experience a life simulation, the life of a medieval alchemist. In the year 1320, you were born in Bologna, northern Italy. Your father was an apothecary who spent his days working with herbs and minerals. From childhood, you were fascinated by the strange powders in your father's cabinet. Sulfur was yellow, verdigris was blue, mercury looked like flowing silver. You felt these substances held the world's secrets. At 7, you were sent to a monastery school where you learned Latin and Greek, the keys to unlocking ancient knowledge. At 12, you secretly read an Arabic alchemy book in the monastery library. It said all things were made of 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. With the right method, lead could be turned into gold. You were completely captivated by this idea. If lead could become gold, the poor would never suffer again. You decided to spend your life pursuing this secret. After leaving the monastery at 15, you apprenticed under an old alchemist named Marco, who lived in a crumbling tower outside the city, spending his days with furnace fires. Master Marco taught you the 3 primes of alchemy. Sulfur represents the soul, mercury represents the spirit, salt represents the body. Understanding their relationship, he said, means understanding the universe itself. Your daily work was stoking fires, distilling, grinding, and mixing, repeating the same experiments over and over, just to observe the subtle changes of matter under high heat. One experiment went wrong. You mixed the proportions incorrectly, and a massive explosion blew apart half the laboratory. Your eyebrows were burned off, leaving a permanent scar on your face. When you were 18, Master Marco passed away. On his deathbed, he left you a handwritten notebook containing his life's experimental insights. He said, "The Philosopher's Stone exists, I just couldn't find it." With your master's notes, you began your own research. You rented a basement near the University of Bologna, attending medical lectures by day and experimenting in the cellar by night. At 20, you discovered something important: nitric acid. By mixing sulfuric acid with saltpeter and heating them, you produced a strong acid that could dissolve silver. This was a remarkable discovery for the time. You used nitric acid to help goldsmiths test the purity of gold and silver, earning your first real income. This made you realize alchemy wasn't just about pursuing gold. It was creating useful things in its own right. At 25, your reputation reached a duke's ears. He sent for you, offering the finest equipment and funding with one condition: produce gold. You worked in the duke's castle for 3 years. The equipment was the best, materials were unlimited, but gold, of course, couldn't be produced. Your anxiety grew as the duke's patience wore thin. To buy time, you began showing the duke useful results. You created wound-healing ointments, distilled strong brandy, and invented a color-fast blue dye. But the duke only wanted gold. At 28, he finally lost patience and threw you in the dungeon, threatening to behead you if you couldn't produce gold. You spent 6 months in the dungeon. With tools smuggled by a sympathetic guard, you experimented with chains and sulfur from the stone walls, producing a small bottle of sulfuric acid. Using this acid, you corroded the cell door's iron lock and escaped on a dark, stormy night. You scaled the castle wall and jumped into the moat, nearly drowning. You fled all the way to Paris, France. Here, nobody knew you, and you could start over. Under a false name, you opened a small apothecary, selling your own remedies. At 35, you met a fellow alchemist in Paris named Nicholas. He wasn't pursuing gold, but something even more ambitious: the universal elixir of immortality. You became partners, pooling resources for a larger laboratory. While researching the elixir, you accidentally discovered an alcohol solution that prevented wound infections. During the years of the Black Death, this saved countless lives. When you were 40, the Black Death finally reached Paris. Streets were filled with corpses, the air thick with death. You gave away all your medicine reserves, distributing them free to the poor. Your partner, Nicholas, couldn't survive the plague, dying in the laboratory. With his last breath, he smiled and said, "Looks like we never found that elixir after all." After losing your closest friend, you became quiet and withdrawn. You began rethinking the meaning of alchemy. Perhaps pursuing gold and immortality were both wrong. The true alchemy was transforming ignorance into knowledge. After 50, you stopped experimenting and began writing, compiling all your life's experimental records. You wrote in cipher, because the church could burn you for heresy at any time. You took 3 students. You told them the most important thing about alchemy wasn't formulas, but the method of observation and recording. Trust no authority. Only trust what you see with your own eyes and experiments. At 60, church inquisitors came to your door. Someone had reported you for practicing witchcraft. You were prepared. You'd hidden your most important manuscripts inside the walls. The trial lasted 3 days. They ransacked your laboratory, burning your equipment and most books. But because the Bishop of Paris spoke for you, your medicine had saved his life, you were sentenced to exile instead of burning. You were exiled to a small village in southern France, where you spent your final 7 years. You used your remaining knowledge to heal villagers and teach them herbal pest control and disease prevention. At 67, you passed away on a quiet night. You never produced gold or found the elixir of immortality. But you discovered nitric acid, invented antiseptic solutions, and wrote hundreds of pages of experimental records. 200 years later, your manuscripts hidden in the walls were discovered. Later scientists said your experiments were the very foundation of modern chemistry. Alchemy couldn't turn lead into gold, but it transformed superstition into science.